All right, welcome back. So welcome to your first assignment in the course. Your first assignment in this course is out of necessity. It's the installations of all the tools you need. So I'm not going to walk through the installation of everything with you. I'm going to let you do it with the doc, but I am going to kind of show you the deliverable that you're going to show at the end. So there's a lot of tools that you need in order to kind of get your computer set up. The first one that I've listed here is Visual Code Studio. So Visual Code Studio is the IDE that we'll be using throughout this course. There's some extensions and some things on that you'll have to set up as well. The next is Git. We're going to be doing source code control with all of our projects. It's just how real software developers work. So every single thing you do in this class, including the installation test, is going to be set up using Git version control. I assume you have some background with Git, but if not, you'll be able to pick things up really quick. The next thing you need in order to use Angular is the Node Package Manager. In order to get the Node Package Manager, you need Node.js installed. Interestingly, we won't use Node really at all in the course, but you need Node so that you can have the Node Package Manager. It's just how they do their dependency system. In order to install Node, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go to the regular old Node website and you can do the download, which is fine. But instead of doing it that way, that puts it into kind of like a system folder. If you do it that way, you're going to be typing sudo a lot on a Mac. And so I actually recommend using a tool called the Node Version Manager, which that's even funnier because like you're installing the Node Version Manager so that it can install Node, and you're installing Node so that it can install NPM, and you're installing NPM so that you can use tools like Angular. So like, see how far back up we can back your tools. So I recommend you install Node Version Manager. Node Version Manager you can use to install Node. When you install Node, you also get NPM. Once you have NPM, you'll use it to install a couple global package tools, so the Angular CLI and Firebase tools. Oops, just realized that's the old name of the Angular CLI. It's now called the @Angular/CLI. Once you have done these installations, you'll be able to do things in your computer, like you'll be able to type, hey, what Git version am I using? And it'll just give you an answer. What NVM version am I using? What Node version am I using? What NPM version am I using? What Angular version am I using? Right now I'm using 1.0.4. That will always be changing, so use whatever the newest is that's available. What Firebase am I using? 3.9, again, that will always be changing. So go through and do those setups. And then once you do, what we're going to do is we're going to make a web app that is just your username -default .firebaseapp.com. And it's just going to say your name can make apps. And you're going to turn that in, if you're taking the class for credit, to the URL submission spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do is I've already got the tools installed, but I'm going to go ahead and show you the steps to make this web app. It's pretty straightforward. And to be honest, these steps you're going to use all the time. So the first thing that I do is I decide, where do I want to store my files at? The two kind of good options are GitHub. If you want to use GitHub for version control system, GitHub is a very popular version control system, most popular in the world, right? Or you can use Rolls-Holman's local Ada. So if you're a Rolls-Holman student, you have an account on Ada, you just go to ada.csse.rolls-holman.edu. Just because I like to use our internal tools, I'm going to use Ada for this. And so the first thing you'll have to do in whatever tool you're using is you're going to have to make a new project. You can see I've done some things for prep here. So you'll say new project in whatever tool you want. For my personal organization, I make an organization to where I'm going to keep all my files in an organization called Summer 2017, but you can do yours however you want. The name of the GitHub repository probably ought to be something like install test. If you want to put your username in it, that's fine, but to be honest, your username probably doesn't have to be in there. And so this is, this is a very basic web app showing that I have the tools installed correctly, right? And that's really all it is. Once you make a project, either on GitHub or Ada, you can go ahead and say create project. And then you need some way to clone that empty repository. If you're using GitHub, they've got a tool called GitHub Desktop, Ada doesn't have a tool like that, but I can just do things from the command line. So I'm just going to copy this URL to my clipboard. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my command line. I'm going to go into a folder that makes sense. And I'm going to say git clone. And then I'm going to put in that clone repository. It says you have cloned an empty repository. Yes, I did. And then I'm going to cd into that folder. So this is my install test. And so this is a blank GitHub repository. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an Angular CLI command. The Angular CLI is a tool that you should definitely learn more about. You can look it up. You can say Angular CLI. You'll probably find their GitHub repository is the top thing. And you can see that there's a lot of information in this about like how do I use this. So you can see here they say ng new foo, and then you cd into foo. npm link, that one's a new one. Everything changes. So the link thing was new to me, and I was like, well, what is that? I realized I was in the wrong section. This is if you're actually a developer making the CLI. So let's go up to the users area. Sorry, I was in the wrong place. Yeah, so the only thing you need to do is you need to say ng new and then the project name. So I'm just going to type ng new install test. I'm actually really happy that there was no new breaking change there with like the npm link thing. So just type ng new install test. Again, you can see that for my GitHub folder, I use Spinal Case. But then for my Angular folder that's inside my Git folder, I chose to use class case. And honestly, I just do that just so I can tell the difference of where I'm at. The installation does take quite a while. If you're on a Mac, you can kind of see at the top here that it's working. Occasionally, like it changes things up here. That's good. So it's doing its thing. It might take a full minute. There you can see that mine's ready now. And what it'll do is it'll just make a single folder called install test. So now you can navigate into install test. Inside install test, there's a lot of different files and folders. By the way, if you're on Windows, you'll have to type dir instead of ls. So it's got a lot of different files in here. And what I want to do is I want to type the command ngserve. What ngserve does is that creates a localhost test of the template that I've just made. So what I've just made is I've basically made a web app using a template, and it's going to say like app works or something like that. So now I'm serving it, and now what you need to do is you need to go into localhost 4200. So if I go to localhost 4200, it says app works. The other thing I recommend for basically all your project is that you've always got the inspect tools up to the console, because if anything goes wrong, you're going to see about it in the console. So I recommend you just always have the inspect console up in Chrome just all the time. So we've just made this project. We've made it inside of our Git folder. We now need to commit our work into Git. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Visual Code Studio. And I'm going to go to, say, File, Open. Sorry, that's off the screen there. And I'm going to just open up my install test. And I'm going to open up the one that is the Angular project. So the install test here, the Angular project. Feels fast for the first time you're doing it, but you're going to do these steps so many times, you're just going to get really bored with them. So there's a couple things going on inside Visual Code Studio here. Couldn't spit it out. One of which is the source control tab here. And what this lets you do is this lets you actually commit your work to Ada in my case. And so I'm just going to say what command I type. So this was ng new install test. So to commit it, I'm going to do command return. That's the shortcut key. So command enter, sorry. Did the commit. And then you'll notice that it actually did the commit locally. That's how Git works. And then you need to also publish the changes. So here you can see I've got a little cloud button down here. So I have to hit the cloud button. It says pick a branch. Origin is the only branch I've got. So I'm going to pick origin. And there you can see it actually pushed it up to the cloud. So it actually did that change. And then, of course, you can go see your files on the cloud. So if I refresh in the cloud here, I can go look at my repository and I can see that I've got an install test folder, and it's got about 40 files in it. It's interesting, 30 files in it. It's interesting that if you look at it in Git, you've got about 30, 40 files. But if you go actually look at it on your computer, so you just go to wherever it's actually saved on your computer, and you say like git info, you'll see that it'll actually bring up a bunch of files. You can actually see that it's like 200 megabytes. It's 24,000 files, and that is all working exactly as intended. And what's happening here is that there's a folder called Node Modules. Node Modules has all your dependencies in it. This is where Angular lives. I think it's interesting that Angular is really just like something you download for each project you use. It's not even, you don't even have Angular installed on your computer. It's just something that npm installs for every project. But this Node Modules, you can see this is the huge folder. And you don't have to check this in, so you can see that the difference between the two. So this is my Node Modules folder, 24,481, and then this is everything. There's only like 30 files difference between the two. So almost everything is inside that Node Modules folder. And you don't check that in because if you were to give your code to somebody else, all they would have to do is they would have to get your repository, and then they'd have to say npm install, and it would create that Node Modules folder. In fact, you could delete it and then just put it back with an npm install. I don't really want to because it would take like a full minute, right? So we've got it serving, we've got it checked in. The next thing I want to do is I want to make just a very, very small change. So inside Visual Code Studio, let's go ahead and make a very small change. Where it says app works, this is inside the app component TS file. I just want you to change it to say your name. So David Fisher can make apps. I think this is kind of cool, but as soon as you save it here, so I just save it over in Visual Code Studio, you can see that Chrome just automatically refreshes, right? And this is, again, one of the advantages of kind of using these newer tools. Cool, and so you can see in Git, there was one change that I made, and I changed it from at work to David Fisher makes apps. So this is going to be my one and only code change. I'm going to commit that locally, and then I can also push it to the cloud there. Once you've finished your code, it was pretty short, you're going to deploy it to Firebase. What I recommend you do is I recommend you just kind of get in the habit of opening up a second tab. So on a Mac, that was Command T I hit. In Windows, you might just have to open up another PowerShell or something like that. And what you can do is you can see that this is in the same folder, but that way I can still be serving and I can do other things while I'm still serving. And what I want to do here is I want to do a ng-build-prod. And what ng-build-prod does is it builds your app for production, right? So in production, there's some things you don't need, like you don't need the live reload feature, and it streamlines it down to a very small group of files. And then that process, what it does, and this is all talked about in the labs as well, is it makes a folder called dist. And so dist are the actual files that need to be served to actually make your web app come alive. And you can see that dist is very lean, right? So it's less than 1 megabyte, so less than one picture, and it's these 6 files or so. So what we need to do is we need to get these files onto the internet. In order to get them onto the internet, we need some hosting service. The hosting service that we're going to use is Firebase. So Firebase does a lot of things. One of them is hosting. So you're going to have to go to console.firebase.google.com, and you're going to have to add a new project. And I recommend you call it your username default. And so you can make your username uppercase if you want to. It doesn't really matter. And so default is just going to be an app that we're just going to kind of use as a placeholder whenever we want to put up something unimportant, right? I've already got one called default, so I'm not going to hit enter on that last thing. Here's mine, default right here. And so go ahead and make that app. And then what you want to do is you want to set the rules in that app. This is just a good habit for when you're getting started. Go to database, go to rules, and we'll talk about this more as we go on, but set the database rules to be true. I guess that's not important for this app, but it is something that we'll need to use whenever we're just learning about Firebase. So we don't care about authentication when we're learning. We just want to set them to true. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to push it to that location. So we have to type Firebase init. Firebase init is a tool we get from the Firebase tools that we installed. It's going to ask us, do you want the database? Do you want functions? Do you want hosting? The way I think about these are as like checkboxes. You use your arrow keys and spacebar to check them or not. And what we want is we want just hosting. So hosting is the only thing we want. For hosting, we want to tie it to our default web app. So you've probably only got one. I've got a bunch. So I want to tie it to Fisher DS default. So I select it, then hit enter. My public directory, I want it to be that dist folder. So that dist folder that I made. It'll ask me a couple questions. Do I want to rewrite things to index.url? Yes, I do. This is actually one that students forget about as they're going through, because the default is no, but we want yes. What that does is no matter what URL you go to, it actually loads the index.html page. That's how Angular works, right? So yes to that question. Dist already has an index. Do you want to overwrite it? No, certainly I don't. I just made it. So that does the Firebase init. If you go into Visual Code Studio, you'll notice that a couple files were made for that Firebase init. So I'm just going to go and check that in as well. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to do a Firebase deploy. So Firebase deploy will actually copy that dist folder and push it up to Firebase. And then they will give you a URL that you can go to. So I'm going to copy that URL that they tell me about. And I'm going to go over into Chrome. And I'm going to paste it right there. And when I hit enter, it should load up. And I've got a caching problem. That's okay. So don't worry about my weirdness there. I had a weird caching problem. So mine says Dave Fisher can make apps. And it works out lovely. It probably will not say /home at the end. Once you've got your tool working, you've got this evidence, assuming you're taking this class for credit, you'll go submit your link to the URL submission spreadsheet, and so that's where you'll put your link, and then that way I can see that you're done. All right, so that is the install test. That is really the focus of this first unit. Just make sure you've got the tools together. We'll see you next time. Bye.